Another important topic that we want to address today, how to help prevent trans discrimination in the workplace. Welcome. I hope we can all hear one another. And Szymon, I'm glad I had an opportunity to introduce you earlier, as I can now hand over the stage to you. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Łukasz. My name is Szymon Martyniak, and I'm hosting this panel as a person who is a part of LGBT plus community and also as cisgender ally. I also care about our trans colleagues and friends, so I'm very happy. We have two fantastic guests today, Daria Zarębska from ABB. Hi, Daria. And Katie Neeves, trans ambassador. So many questions, so little time. Katie, Daria. So maybe let's start with straight with questions. Daria, your story has several key chapters. They brought you to the place where you are today. You work at ABB. You live in Poland. I'm wondering, what has been the biggest challenge for you in your workplace?
Thank you, Szymon. I think the main obstacle was definitely the lack of awareness, because the kind of support that I needed when I was starting to transition wasn't very much. It wasn't it was simple things like I needed my ID, my chosen pronouns, name and gender to be respected. But that wasn't easy because it was a few years ago, before the whole, let's say, diversity and inclusion movement took off at ABB, and I had to be my own advocate to explain does it mean to be transgender and fight for my own rights. So of course, this was kind of specific to me because of where I live. I live in Poland, but I'm also married. I am a parent of two kids, and the obstacle I had with my transition is that in Poland, to transition legally, you need to divorce first, and then you need to sue your parents. And this is quite a long legal battle to do. And also it was denied to me by my own doctor, who demanded that I go through this process before I start my medical transition. So when I started my coming out at the company, it was well before I started the medical transition. So I also didn't have the support that I needed to also to somehow change my appearance to fit to what I perceive myself as. And it was challenging for people also to understand how one day my name was different, and people knew me for so many years, and one day I came and I said that I'm Daria, and I'm a transgender woman. So it took me a long time to change my ID, to change my business email, because there was no procedures yet. And I think that, as you mentioned, the biggest obstacle was the lack of awareness, this need to fight for everything. But I think the greatest help was really the people who, especially HR people, who are really great, helpful, and even though there was no procedures, they tried to somehow overcome these obstacles. And also for sure my ERG group, because the HR connected me to some queer people at ABB Poland who started to organize earlier. And seeing these people work with me, and just I was inspired by them, and that helped me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daria, for sharing your story. And now, Katie, I'm wondering, what activities do you as a trans ambassador put the most emphasis on? I mean, what kind of activities are key to ensure the sense of security for trans people in business?
100%. It's got to be training all the way. And so often I get brought into companies to do trans awareness training or inspirational speaking, but it can be to a voluntary audience. And that's okay, but what usually happens is that only the people who are already on side and who are already supportive turn up. And so I end up preaching to the converted. So it's much better to have, if a company is serious about changing the culture of their business, then training has to be mandatory. Everyone needs to be trained, because if you don't do that, the people that really need to hear my message just don't turn up, and they just don't hear it. If I just tell you a little bit about my own situation, so I don't work for a company. I've been a freelance photographer and filmmaker for 35 years. And actually, sorry, professional photographer and filmmaker for 35 years. I've been freelance for about 25. So I've been running my own business for that time. But when I came out very publicly as being trans, I've been living as a man for 48 years. But my business at that point was, and still is actually, named after my old male name, which is Martin. It's Martin Neeves Photography and Film. And it had been an established brand for 22 years. And I felt that if I changed the name of the business to Katie Neeves Photography and Film, when I changed my own name to Katie, nobody would know who that was, and it would be like starting the business from scratch. So what I had to do was to, as a business protection exercise, I had to come out very publicly and honestly and openly as being trans, and continue to do that. And so what I decided to do was to make a coming out video, and I sent it to all my clients, and I put it on all my social media. Go big or go home. Yeah. And I was so worried because I had no legal protections at all. So unlike somebody who's in a staff job, I didn't. If my clients had a problem with my being trans, then the phone would stop ringing, and I'd lose all my income and my reputation, everything, my business gone. So it was a huge risk. And I remember my finger nervously hovering over the mouse, knowing as soon as I make that click to make the video live, my life would never be the same again. I clicked the mouse and I waited. But then I had to go out on a job. But mine wasn't on the job, though. I took the pictures as quickly as I could. But when I came back, I needn't have worried, because when I came back, I was inundated with hundreds of messages of support. I felt so loved. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. So that's a bit about my coming out story. But 100%, it's got to be training all the way. If people aren't trained, then they're never going to get it. So that's definitely the emphasis.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this tip. So training is the key, and thank you very much for sharing your stories. And now we know how it looks like when somebody experience challenges when they have to change names and employer branding for their own firm. So thank you very much for sharing your story. Daria, it seems that the moment of recruitment is fundamental for trans people. And from your perspective, which are the moments in your employee's life, let's call it this way, were important to you? So, and maybe you felt taken care well by your employer.
Okay, so I think maybe not in terms of stages of career, but other initiatives or things that the company could do to take better care of myself. Definitely, I feel it needs to be somehow set on paper, some kind of procedure for HR, because whenever you cannot expect the transgender people to somehow risk. Coming out is very, very, very risky. Feels very risky, and when someone comes to HR or to a manager, they need to know how to react. So I think having some kind of procedure is very important. And I think there's so many examples, NGOs and other companies that already did it, that you don't need to research it on your own. Of course, you should listen to the voice of your employees, but in case of trans people, there's not so many trans people around. I think we're a minority even in the LGBTQ community. So the company needs to take this burden on themselves. And I think that it's important. You mentioned recruitment, that when you recruit employees, you should ask them about their about the pronouns that they would like to use, the name that they would like to use. This is so simple, and many people, cisgender people, are already using different names, for their business, or cisgender women in Poland tend to change their surname when they get married, for example. Yes, so these things are happening. People are changing names at work, and this is not different for trans people. And the last thing is, I think, related to recruitment, onboarding of new employees. You should be really clear about your diversity strategy to the employees. You should mention if you have ERGs. Give contact to people that can be trusted. So if anyone has any issues with coming out at work, they can have someone who they can trust. Thank you.
Daria, thank you very much. Now, Katie, I'm wondering, what pieces of advice would you have for small businesses or for independent traders? Is there anything they can do to be more trans inclusive?
Certainly. I mean, obviously training. I've already mentioned that, but to let people know that they are, sort of put just things like using pronouns on your email signature. That in itself lets people know that you understand what the issues are. Using pronouns on your email signature, isn't just for trans people. Many people have names that aren't obviously gendered. Names like Chris or Leslie or Dr. Smith, for instance. You wouldn't know what gender people are from that. So just things like that just show, and even just putting on the bottom of your email signature that you are trans or LGBTQIA plus supportive, whatever. That I think is a really good thing. So I think it's just signaling that to trans people that you are supportive. I think that's a really positive thing.
Thanks for sharing. And I also think from what I read in research, it's always crucial to show that you support the LGBT plus community, because people assume you are not an ally when you don't tell them you are an ally. So thank you very much for sharing.
I always thank people when I see them wearing a rainbow lanyard, for instance, to show that they are LGBTQI plus supportive. That means a lot to me when I see that. Or if I see a poster up in someone's office saying that they are an ally, that makes a huge difference.
Thank you very much, Katie. And Daria, have you come across any stereotypes about trans people in business? And maybe some tips how to deal with them? Any tips for allies, how to react to them?
Stereotypes. That's probably there's a lot of them around for sure about transgender people, because the society is still not very aware about LGBTQ plus culture and society in general. So we're quite often mistaken with drag queens. So that's my own even experience. Like, I was asked by people at work if I would come to work all dressed up and glamorous, and I'm a shy person. I feel like I'm a regular woman. It's hard to somehow, these expectations won't go out if you don't talk about LGBTQ plus culture, and you don't invite people to have some kind of meetings to share. Like, we have the ERG, and we try to show our stories so that people get more familiar with like how our lives look like. And because I still I cannot change my legal name. I cannot go through the whole, let's say, medical transition. And there were days, at least when I started to transition, that I would go to work, try to there is this day, let's say, always everyone has this day when you don't feel so well, and you're not in the mood to dress up and do makeup and whatever. You just go there, and people would ask me if if this transition is still a thing, because I don't appear trans anymore. So I think it's important to really to talk, to discuss, to show examples, stories, because without this, there's a lot of stereotypes that you need to deal with in your daily life.
Daria, thank you very much. I'm wondering, Katie, if you would add anything about stereotypes, how to deal with them.
Yeah.
Anything?
A word. I think Daria made some excellent points there, particularly about drag, and then also I think that the standards that trans people are held up to, we're supposed to be like Barbie doll, yeah, ultra feminine,
Yes.
yeah. We're just ordinary people, aren't we? We're just ordinary women. That's it. But I think there are some common misconceptions. Many people think that we choose to be trans. No one chooses to be trans. The only choice we have is whether we do anything about it or not and decide to transition. And the research that I did showed that most trans people who decide to transition after the initial loss, pain, and heartache and bumpy journey along the way usually go on to lead happy and contented lives, whereas many trans people who decide not to transition and decide to lead their lives for other people, sadly they often end up in a spiral of depression or often worse. And so our journey is not about trying to be somebody that we're not. It's about trying to be ourselves and wanting to be happy. And ultimately, we all want to be happy, whether we're trans or not, don't we? Also, I think another thing is that if a cisgender person hears any transphobic remarks anywhere, and a trans person isn't there to defend themselves, then step in and speak up and defend trans people, because this is something that happened to me actually a couple of years ago. I was at an event where there were quite a lot of people in the room who knew me. There were two men the other side of the room, and one of them pointed me out and said, "Oh, you see that woman over there? She used to be Martin Neeves. I don't get it myself." And was talking about me sort of quite disparagingly. But thankfully, the man that had that he was talking to had the benefit of watching quite a lot of my vlogs, because I've been vlogging my whole journey. And he said, "Well, actually, there's more to it than that." And then he went on to educate the other man, and I thought that is brilliant. That is what a true ally does. I think, I'll be forever grateful to him for doing it, because it would have been so much easier for him to have said nothing and just let it wash over him and then moved on. But he didn't. He did the hard thing and stood up for me. And I think finally, the last thing I'd say is that when somebody does come out to you as being trans, so often the first question that people ask me straight away is about my genitalia or about lower surgery. Think about it. You wouldn't ask a cisgender person about their genitalia or about surgery upon first meeting them. I think you'd need to buy them a very large gin and tonic first, wouldn't you? You'd have to know them really well. But even with your best friend, you wouldn't bring up that subject first. You'd let them do it. And as trans people, we're no different in that regard at all. So I think that there's a few pointers there for you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Daria. Just because I can see we are slowly running out of time. So to sum up our discussion, I would like to ask you to give us, or actually to give employers and business, one most important tip from you, how to make businesses more trans-friendly. Katie, what would you say?
Well, I've already been banging on about training, but it's training all the way. That's the most important thing. But and using pronouns and then also just looking at making the workplace more friendly in terms of like have gender neutral toilets, because for many trans people, using public bathrooms is a constant source of anxiety, and certainly when many trans people go out in public, often they don't drink, they deliberately dehydrate themselves because they're too frightened to use the public facilities. So there's lots of things like that, and they're having the policy in place, as Daria mentioned earlier. So there's loads of things, but I know we're running out of time, and I do talk a lot.
Katie, thank you so much. Daria, what would you recommend?
Yeah, probably two things. If I were an HR person, I would try to, if I have trans employees or LGBTQ employees who come with some issues, yes, I would try to connect them together to inspire them to build ERGs. That's what happened at ABB. We had a great, let's say, a sponsor or initiator from HR at the beginning, and then we organized and we were able to work out some issues together. Yeah, so building ERGs is really crucial. And from my point of view, also dress codes, I think they enforce many gender stereotypes. They don't affect just transgender people, also cisgender women, for example. Yes, so there's quite a lot about dress codes that are that somehow they appeal to some gender stereotypes. And I think what you can do is try to don't try to somehow draw the ideal image of a woman and a man and how they should look at work. Try to appeal to people's sense of tidiness, to explain your company culture and what kind of, let's say, you what do you expect from the employees, like in terms of their mentality? And I think the dress code will somehow come with it too. Don't appeal to stereotypes.
Yeah.
Daria,
Can I just say about the
Katie,
dress code?
yeah,
Sorry, can I just say about
yeah,
the dress code as well? That's a brilliant point about the dress code. But so many companies think that by making the dress code gender neutral, that's the answer to it. But it's not, because then generally what that happens is they end up masculizing the dress code. But just have a variety of clothes within that are branded clothes that are on brand. So they can be skirts, they can be trousers, they can be dresses, tops, shirts, and just let people choose what they want to wear out of that choice. So it just doesn't have to be gender neutral at all.
Thank you very much, Katie. So many tips. If businesses implement it, I feel that they will be seen as trans-friendly, and let's hope we are building now a better world. Katie, Daria, thank you so much for this fantastic panel discussion. Now, over to Łukasz. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Szymon. Thank you, panelists. Yes, we do. We have very interesting questions, but very little time to address them. So please feel free to make your choices, whichever ones you would like to address. Let's start with Dorota. What was the most supportive thing your colleagues did or said that made you feel really accepted? That's question number one. And then Dominika, from your perspective, how to react to somebody's coming out? Accepting by saying okay, asking any questions, or not saying anything? And finally, question from Emily. Katie and Daria, thank you for this session. Could you share any examples of excellent inclusion that you've experienced or seen in the workplace or other workplaces? Who would like to try?
Okay.
I can try to answer the first question. What was the greatest thing that for my line managers did is that when I said that I will transition, they updated all of the presentations, organization charts. Even though I couldn't change my name legally and my business email for some time, they would change my name everywhere. They would introduce me as Daria also to some clients, so I wouldn't have to come out and explain each time. Yes, I had their support, and for them I was Daria from this moment on.
Yeah. And I would say that the most supportive things that people said to me is basically just using my correct pronouns and my correct name, and just trying, because I know that it's difficult for people when you're first told, but when somebody comes out and then you're told to use the different pronouns, if you've been used to using he, him, or she, her for years, and then you've got to change and to use she, her, he, him, they, them, or whatever pronoun. But please try, because it really does make such a difference to be validated like that when people do that. And if you're not sure which pronouns to use, just ask, because most trans people like being asked which pronouns to use, because it shows that you care and you've got a willingness to get it right. And then when people do come out to you, I think the correct response is congratulations, because it's a really positive thing. And so don't feel sorry for us, feel happy for us, because it's life affirming. It really is. And then finally, the last question was about the sort of examples of excellent sort of procedure, if you like. I can think of several, but there was one recently. Actually, I did a trans awareness training session for a council in London recently. It was back in June, in Pride Month, and I've just been told that it had a lot of impact on them, and they actually changed a lot of their policies on the back of that one session, which was amazing. I thought that was fantastic. And then since then, they've just booked me. In fact, today I've just done one this morning. I only finished it about half an hour ago, talking to all their top management team. And the next week I'm going back to talk to 350 of their middle management team, and they are taking it seriously. And I think is amazing. If they do that sort of thing, then it shows that they are serious about changing the culture. So I think that's the thing to look at.
Katie, Daria, Szymon, thank you very much. It's been a very important and also very interesting discussion, I'm sure, for our audience. Thank you. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
And you. Thank
you.
Thank you very
much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.